What comes next for the United States women's national team? They exit SheBelieves Cup, the eighth edition of this annual tournament, as four consecutive wins for the team. This is also the fourth consecutive SheBelieves Cup title for head coach Vlatko Andonovski during his tenure with the team. They're officially 5 months out from the World Cup. There's one April window remaining for this team, and there is another window in June. But we have to imagine or anticipate, perhaps, that a World Cup roster will be announced prior to that June friendly taking place. So I think if you're looking at this in the lens of what is it going to take for players to leave an impact, they may only have one international window of time, obviously combined with
Yeah.
their NWSL regular season play, to try to make an impact on this coaching staff to push for a spot on their roster.
Right, and it was reported actually earlier today, I believe, that U.S. is going to play Ireland in April.
Yeah,
Unofficially reported, coming out of a bunch of different.
it looks like it came out of Ireland, actually.
Yeah,
So nothing officially announced from U.S. soccer side of things, but looks like outlets in Ireland have reported it, and some reporters stateside, I believe Jeff Kassouf, sort
yeah.
of trying to reach out to sources and confirming that as well. So we'll have to see, what comes with the announcement, whether or not that's going to be a 1 or 2 game series against Ireland, but interesting to note that it's going to be another World Cup bound team that the United States is going to get an opportunity
Yeah.
against. And then
Honestly, I think that's more of a plus for Ireland.
yeah,
No, it's no knock on Ireland by any means, but as a debutante for the Irish Republic of Ireland going to the World Cup, yeah, you want to play against the two-time
yeah,
World Cup champions in the United States. I mean, that's massive for Ireland. But yeah, I mean, I think we have to look ahead for this United States team because they're coming off of a SheBelieves win. They're coming off of 2 friendlies in New Zealand that happened earlier in January, so at the start of this year. But it comes down to the questions, right? There's only 5 months. There's only probably 3 months until the World Cup roster is being named. And when you look at who was ultimately named to this SheBelieves Cup roster and then how that translates to what could potentially be a World Cup roster, there's no Sophia Smith listed on this current roster for SheBelieves. She's dealing with a bit of a tweak and an injury. She should be back though, right? Barring anything else that happens. Tierna Davidson also involved in the SheBelieves training camp, but not playing in any games, just training. So not really listed on these rosters as so far as it goes. But I think that those are some of the questions that you have to look at. I mean, even reflecting on the United States' most recent game against Brazil, we didn't see an Ashley Hatch come into this most recent game. We did not see a Midge Purse get significant minutes at all during the SheBelieves Cup. 2 players that I think have been on the bubble for Vlatko Andonovski in terms of their impact in the game immediately. I mean, we saw Taylor Korniak come in these final 10 minutes of this game against Brazil as in replace of Alex Morgan to be a defensive presence, to be an aerial presence. I'm not entirely sure, but higher up the pitch instead of someone like a Hatch or a Purse. And I think that is pretty interesting and pretty telling about where Vlatko Andonovski is sitting right now and looking at important players versus players that could be replaced. And Sophia Smith is going to be on the World Cup roster. So who does she replace?
No, I'm with you 100%. I think if you're looking at performances coming out of the SheBelieves Cup, I think especially with this recent win against Brazil and that ultimately clinching the cup for them, you have to look at the players who didn't get extended time in games like this. If anything, maybe take a look at that bench and those players who kind of are in this realm of depth, or hey, these are going to be our game changers or our bench. We saw players like Trinity Rodman, Ashley Sanchez, Christy Mewis. Those were the players who got extended minutes in She Believes Cup. Now, was the coaching staff and their hand forced a little bit in that? Perhaps,
Yeah. But
maybe. Rose Lavelle was unavailable for the first 2 games.
but you can't play that game. I think it's almost a blessing in disguise that
Yeah,
Rose Lavelle dealt with a bit of an injury throughout this
yeah,
tournament, because it forced the US coaching staff to look at their bench and say,
mhm,
okay, who is going to be the replacement for Rose Lavelle in a situation like this? I mean, you have to look at
yeah,
that. Of course, you can play those games in your head. Okay, what if, yeah, Sophia Smith isn't available? She wasn't available all tournament. But when you're actually faced with it, it's important to see how those players do in those situations. We saw Ashley Sanchez, get back-to-back starts in the midfield and play significant time and then sub in this third game for Rose Lavelle, and also get significant time. She subbed in at the 70th minute for a Lavelle. So I think that the injury from Lavelle forced the coaching staff to make some changes and make some decisions that maybe they weren't expecting to do, or just hadn't really thought that
yeah.
far ahead. And it was very telling, I think.
Oh, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. I think, I'm with you. It's a blessing in disguise. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it did. I think it forced the coaching staff to take a closer look at some different scenarios. I mean, we're talking about players who got extended minutes, during this, and yes, it's some of the depth players, but it's also the players who are returning from injury or have returning from their absence. We talked about Crystal Dunn getting,
Mhm.
three consecutive starts. Two of them were 45-minute shifts, and then this last game was a full hour. Um, and the return of Emily Sonnet, she was utilized over the course of this She Believes Cup as well, which ultimately meant that we saw less time from Sofia Huerta, someone who's been with this team in the outside back position for quite some time. And if we're seeing more players get rotated in, others are going to get rotated out. I know that there are head coaches who are, headed to the World Cup, and they are still hopeful that it will be a 26-player roster. But FIFA has given
We're not there yet. Yeah.
zero indication that that is going to happen. And, unless these rosters are magically, given the green light to select 26 players, I think that there's going to be some disappointed folks left off of that World Cup roster just based off of She Believes
Yeah.
Cup.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't play the what if game when
Yeah.
it comes to stuff like this. And even so, if say a week before they announce the roster for the World Cup, they say, okay, we are going to do 26 players. Like your mind should already be made up exactly who's that number one, replace it, exactly who's that number two, injuries that happen, anything that happens. I think that this was a good She Believes Cup, though, in terms of learning what could happen. I don't think Ashley Hatch is one of those players that could kick out a Sophia Smith, and that sucks. I'm gonna be
Taylor
honest.
Korniak all of a sudden became the
Yeah,
off the bench option
yeah,
for a higher targeted forward position in She Believes Cup. So she exits New Zealand as an option for the six, and now exits She Believes Cup as a late game option for a target forward. So it's like every there's a lot to take out of this, and it'll be interesting to see um, how play in the league is weighted
right.
with possibly one a window remaining before decisions have to be made. And we'll keep an eye on it as
And
always.
there's other players potentially coming back from injury. You look at Ekaterina Macario,
Mhm.
how's her recovery? She's
Yeah,
expected to be back by April, to
yeah.
play with this team. What
Ireland
about
is
a
a great
Kristen
team.
Press, Kelly O'Hara? There are so many players, Casey Kruger, uh, that are still in the
Yeah.
mix that are just dealing with an injury right now. I think when looking at those names that I just threw out there between Kelly O'Hara, Kat Macario, I'm going to put Tierna Davidson on that list as well.
Mhm.
Tobin Heath, um, Casey Kruger, even I'll throw out there.
Yeah.
I think some are more likely to make a World Cup roster than others. I think Tierna Davidson is one of those that is really likely to make a World Cup roster. I think Kelly O'Hara as well. I think despite what we saw in the positives from a Fox Dunn outside back pairing and understanding that Sonnet is most likely that first alternate in. I think Sofia Huerta getting significant minutes in that second match for the United States against Japan says a little bit about what Vlahovinovsky is thinking. But I think in terms of the players that aren't named right now to this roster, out due to injury at this point, who are the names most likely to make it on this roster, and who are the ones that are the least likely to make it on?
Are you asking me right now, or are you
I'm asking you.
or are we saving that for a whole other episode
I
for
mean, yeah, that could be a whole entire deep dive, but I'm just like, those are options and champagne problems that Black Witanowski has to talk
Oh, yeah.
about.
No, I mean, I think we've highlighted him a little bit. I think we've indicated, players who saw, little time in this tournament are likely to be those players, either on the bubble or on the edge of there's no edge to a bubble, but maybe edge of a cliff. I don't know. They're just like probably just, lower and lower and lower kind of on the finalist, right? For that final World Cup roster, which is probably at this point going to change for the coaching staff week
Right.
to week to week to week up until even that April window. I mean, the fact that Andonovsky is still alluding to some of these players who have yet to get back into camps, I think is a pretty telling sign that they want to keep as many doors open as possible.
Yeah. I even think
For
the Sam Coffey door is still open, despite a player that traveled to New Zealand during the January camp and did not see a single minute on the field and then was not named for this SheBelieves Cup roster. I think that
Yeah,
those options still need to be available because you never know what's gonna happen.
you never know. But when it happens, we'll be here to talk about it. That's for sure.